Hello. Welcome once again to your favorite hour of the week. Because it's Wednesday night webinar night, right? And who doesn't love a good Wednesday night webinar night? I mean, come on. It's pretty amazing. That's why we're here. Wednesday night webinar brought to you by OCD. OCD online teletherapy service. Download the OCD app at Google Play or the iOS store. Is it iOS? I don't have Apples, so whatever Apple does. Whatever. Background Kaylee. We'll put it in the comments, I'm sure. Teletherapy services available in all 50 states now. And continuing to get more and more people covering that insurance so that it becomes more and more affordable for everybody. So that being said, welcome everyone. We've got some questions coming in already. Background Kaylee sent me a couple of questions that came in over the Insta, as the kids call it these days. You know, the old people call it the Instagram, but that gram is just too heavy. So now it's just Insta from what I've been told. So we'll see what that means. And we're going to jump into some of the Q. Oh, Carl, notice the haircut, by the way. Thank you, Carl. Yes, appreciate that. Thanks, Carl. And I like your comment, Carl. If you're wondering if it's OCD, probably. Yeah, that's a fun comment. All right, we got someone, looks like, well, it might have been a little bit too late for them to do this, depending on where they live. But, oh yeah, not in the U.S. But we're going to record this, of course, because Background Kaylee posts all these up on our NoCD YouTube channel. So that's pretty awesome. So the questions come, compulsive acts have made me even harm my body from cleaning. Yes, that can happen. I've seen that. I once worked with someone who took a shower for 24 hours. Not a good thing for your body to take a shower for 24 hours. Let me tell you, it is just not good for you. So it's interesting, isn't it? OCD might very well tell you these germs on your body are bad, are dangerous. You need to stay away from them. Otherwise, something bad or awful will happen to you. They will harm you. And so what do you do in response? You might do harmful things to yourself as a way to get off the germs because you think, well, you really have to scrub, or shower in order to get those germs off your body. And it turns out, instead of the germs doing any damage to you, you do damage to yourself. Now, this is proof of concept of something that I have said here before, and I will say again, OCD doesn't give a crap about you. Let me just remind all of you about that. OCD does not care about you. It does not care how you feel. It only cares how it feels. It is not about your happiness. It is about its own happiness. If you're uncomfortable, you say, but my OCD says I have to do this, right? And I'm purposely kind of talking about it like that. Well, if this thing that I purposely have to do appeases OCD but hurts me, then basically what I've decided is, you know what? My OCD is more important than I am. My OCD is my God. My OCD is the thing that I worship. My OCD is the most important thing in my life. The appeasing of my OCD is more important than anything else in the world. OCD is more important than anything or anyone that I value, right? Because even if you'd be afraid of, let's say, harming someone, and that person said, I don't care if you think about harming me, it just doesn't matter. But you say, yes, but I just can't be around you anymore because I'm so afraid that I might harm you. OCD has said, the fact they don't care doesn't really matter. Do what I tell you to do, and then that's what's important. And even if that person begs and please don't go, please don't leave me, please stay with me. And you say, no, I can't, I just can't, I can't deal with it. Now you've hurt them emotionally. But you might say, well, at least I didn't hurt them physically. What's worse? Why are we trading one harm for another one? Why have we decided that to emotionally hurt them is okay, as long as we don't maybe physically hurt them in that situation? So, again, OCD doesn't care about your comfort. OCD doesn't care how you feel. OCD cares about its own comfort and how it feels. But you are just not important to your OCD. Not at all. Think about that. My obsession is about obsessing. I question whether or not a thought is from OCD and analyze it. And analyze if I control these thoughts. Well, no one controls any thoughts, right? I'm definitely not in control of the thoughts that I have. I'm wondering now, reading this, if that means I have a problem, if maybe I should be in control of this. So would it be better in my life if I suddenly decided, as of today, I must be in total control of every thought that I have ever had, or that I ever will have? I must know where it came from. I must know why I have it. I must know the meaning behind it. I must know the cause of it. I must figure out how to neutralize it. And I must never have it again. Now, let me ask all of you who have OCD who are listening tonight. Would any of you recommend that for anyone you love? Would you advise anyone you know, if they had the exact same thoughts that you have, or images or urges that you have, would you say to them, you know what? Why don't you develop OCD? Because that just makes everything better. Would that be your advice to anybody? And if the answer is no, you would not advise anyone else to do what you do. Why then do you do it if you don't think it's a good idea for anyone else to do it? I mean, think about it. Let's say you were really addicted to a very serious drug. Like I remember that there's that drug crocodile that came, I think it was from Russia, came out, and it, over the course of 2 years, turned your skin really scaly. People died from it. If you were in the midst of doing that and you were feeling horrible and going through withdrawal, would you want to say to anyone you loved, hey, this is the way to go. This is good stuff. You need to do this. I mean, yeah, my skin's falling off, and I don't taste anything anymore, and my teeth have rotted out, and I've lost my septum, and the doctors tell me if I don't stop, I'm probably going to die in 2 weeks. But my gosh, you need to do this. This is the most amazing thing in the world. I think most people would look at you and be like, no, thank you. No, I'm good. I'll pass. I think most people would also say that if you brought your OCD up to them, hey, by the way, I noticed that you touched that door handle over there, and I'm just curious, have you thought about how many people have maybe gone to the bathroom today, wiped their butts, handled their genitals, maybe didn't thoroughly wash their hands afterwards, who then touched that door handle, and how many germs are on there, and now that it's on your hands, you might rub your eye and then get sick from whatever they have that's maybe sitting down there and everything. And wouldn't it just be better if you carried around a 7-gallon bucket of hand sanitizer and just dip yourself in it every day in order to feel good? Wouldn't that feel a lot better for you? I mean, don't you think that's a great idea, and just to do that? No, really? Because I don't know. I've been doing it for a long time, and I haven't gotten sick, so it must work, right? And I could say to you, well, I haven't done it for a long time, and I also haven't gotten sick, so it must work too. I mean, I always love to point out, by the way, to people with contamination concerns, when they talk about how, well, all of this really keeps me from getting ill. This is a really good thing to do, and I should keep doing it. And my standard response to them is, I find it interesting that you say that, because if this is what worked and this is what kept us from getting ill, I must have one of the best immune systems in the world, because I haven't had a sick day in 20 years. Other than maybe for a headache, but for an illness or anything. And I do ERP constantly with people, where I'm doing all sorts of weird stuff and touching things and eating, food off weird places and whatever it is. So maybe I'm the mutant who doesn't get sick for anything, right? Or maybe all of us would do just fine without all of the OCD things that we would do. Mason says, how do you actually lean into your most distressing and graphic thoughts, like sexual taboo thoughts, POCD, incest? Should you try to provoke them or just accept them if they come in? Well, I think we do a little bit of both there, Mason. When we're doing very specific ERP, we do purposely provoke intrusive thoughts to purposely sit with them. But the goal is to learn that after you've purposely provoked them and learned to sit with them, then if they do pop into your head randomly, that you've now learned how to sit with them, right? So it's kind of a twofold experience here. If they do randomly pop in your head, sit with them. But we together in therapy are also going to purposely create those very sensations to teach you that you can handle them, that doesn't matter what it is that pops in your head. So, we could all do it again today. I've done it before, but let's all hope or pray or wish for the ceilings above us in whatever room we're in right now to collapse on us all by the end of this webinar. So I'm going to stare at this ceiling for a minute and go, please, whatever you can do, please collapse on me by the time we're done today. I beg of you to come loose from the 2x4s that you are nailed to and fall down and smash onto me by the time this webinar is done. And I will do no compulsive behaviors to neutralize you whatsoever. I really, really hope this ceiling right there falls on top of me. Okay, so we'll now see if that happens. I have now, Mason, just provoked the very thought, and we will now see if it comes true. Okay, we'll go from there, and we'll just kind of see how it goes. All right. Hey, background Kaylee, could you message Miss Molly and let her know I'm doing a webinar? Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see. How do I deal with OCD thoughts that focused on the past and not what may happen in the future? For example, my OCD wants me to believe that I've committed horrible crimes in the past and I don't remember. Well, thank you for bringing that up. Just because your OCD wants something doesn't mean that we have to believe it, right? Now you're going to say, but it feels so real. Oh my gosh, it feels so real. How could it not be true? Why would I ever feel such a way if it wasn't so true? And since OCD is located in your emotional system, not your logical system, or else I could just very logically walk you through it. Well, let's go back to that date that you think that crime occurred, and let's actually pull some security footage from wherever you think the crime was. And hey, you weren't even there that day. Wow, what do you know? So I'm not here to logic you out of the experience. But since OCD is an emotional issue, right? And OCD creates then this really big emotional kind of pull, this pull on that fight, flight, or freeze response, this kind of experience. Now it feels real. And, As they say, if it feels real, it must be true, right? Wrong. But it's easy to fall for that, isn't it? It's easy to believe that if something feels real, it must be true. Okay. I've used this example before, but with my tinnitus, I'm hearing a sound that none of you are hearing right now. You might say, hey, that sound doesn't exist. And I say that I'm hearing it. Yes, it does. Who's right? Different interpretations, right? So there's an OCD interpretation of things, but then there's a non-OCD interpretation of things, which is I seem to have this disorder that leads me to believe all sorts of weird crap. And just because it wants me to believe it doesn't mean it's true. As Carl's on here. Hi, Carl. And by the way, Carl's doing his own show these days too. So thank you, Carl. But Carl, I liked your comment a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to have you type it in again. Something along the lines of everyone on this webinar represents a collection of some of the most dangerous individuals in the entire world, or everyone on this webinar has OCD. It's one or the other. So I either gather every Wednesday night the largest crime syndicate known to the human race together in one spot, or you all have OCD. Just kind of make your decisions based on all of those things and see what you think, right? All right, let's keep moving here and see where we're at. Is sexual orientation OCD common, and how do you do exposures for it? It's a very common type of OCD, and exposures for it and response prevention, because let's remember, we don't just do exposures, we do exposure and response prevention. We're exposed to things all the time, okay? We're always exposed to things. The key isn't being exposed to something. That is important, but the key part of the therapy is the response prevention, where we sit with the discomfort and we learn that we can handle the discomfort. That's the most important part of it. So what do? Well, we sit with whatever intrusive thoughts or images or urges pop into our head, and we learn that that's all that they are, right? And I'm married, but I can picture, well, I'm waiting for the ceiling to collapse. And now I picture the reason the ceiling's going to collapse is because 3 incredibly cut and chiseled Chippendales dancers wearing nothing but tiny little G-strings and tool belts are going to come in and rip the ceiling down. So now I'm picturing 3 Chippendales dancers along with the ceiling collapsing. I mean, it's going to be a really weird crime scene by the end of the night here. But am I potentially now of a different orientation than I've identified myself as, or can I just not care that I'm now picturing 3 Chippendale dancers wearing tool belts and a hot little G-string, and still be totally content with who I am and how I live? I'm cool with that. You bring all the Chippendales dancers you want down here wearing whatever they wear, or nothing at all even. I don't care. Doesn't change who I am. If I had OCD, it might say to me, but what if you suddenly thought that was the cat's meow right there, right? What if all of a sudden you just changed it and we're like, whoa, well, look what I've been missing for all these years. Okay, maybe that would happen. Maybe it would. I don't think so, but I could be fine with that. Okay. I mean, it'd be a bit of a weird conversation with my wife, but I don't have time to be so concerned about all those things because I got lots of other stuff to do. And I'd rather focus on those other things. But OCD says, but wait a minute, those other things aren't as important as me. I am the most important thing in the world. Do what I say. And I want all of you to work on saying, no, OCD, you are not the most important thing in the world. In fact, you are a jackass, and I think you suck. So that's where we'd like to go with it, if at all possible. There's a question about getting single case agreements with insurance. Yes, it's a great question, actually. If you have insurance and your provider isn't covered by your insurance because there are networks where people go, and if you have a therapist you want to see but they're not in your network, if you can prove very often to your insurance company, who will try to say to you, by the way, oh, we have OCD specialists here. And if you go interview those people, and I would always interview a therapist, right? Or at least the company they work for, to make sure that they do exposure and response prevention therapy. That's always a good thing. But if you go and you say to the insurance company, by the way, none of those people do exposure and response prevention therapy, the gold treatment of OCD, standard treatment of OCD. I'd like a single case agreement to go see this person who does. Then you've got a lot more, ground to stand on, if that's the case. So, Lisa, that's what I would try to do. Should someone with OCD stay single? Why? They could, if they want to, but if they want to get married, they can get married. There's no hard and fast rule of you're not allowed to date or to get married or anything of that nature whatsoever. So you can choose to do whatever the heck you want to do, as far as I'm concerned. Kristen says, it's not my primary theme, but I've noticed I have some contamination-related intrusive thoughts and some mild compulsions. Should I work on stopping these even if they don't really interfere with my day? I would, just to make sure that they don't kind of continue to creep in more and more. Think about if you find some mold in your house. Yeah, it's not that much. I'll leave it. After a while, that gets bigger and bigger. Just a little bit more. So I always like to, if I notice something, and the principles to do with ERP to face it, why not go ahead and give it a go, right? See what happens. Alfonso says, so I've been having racing thoughts and really don't know exactly what I'm thinking about. It's someone like an adrenaline rush, and at the end of the night, it's exhausting. Yeah, racing thoughts, that can do that. And, for some people, there are things like bipolar disorder or manic depressive, as we used to call it, where there are racing thoughts, right? And that could be a symptom of a mood issue. But there's also some people who will describe their intrusive thoughts or images or urges as kind of racing, that there's always something flying into their head that they're worried about or concerned about or something of that nature. So they can be very much exhausting. And that's where I would say consulting with a therapist can be a very helpful experience for you so that you learn the best way to handle those so that they aren't so very overwhelming to you anymore. So I hope that helps a little bit. Ryan says he has sexual orientation OCD. By the way, I know that some people have written HOCD, but I just want to remind everyone we don't really call it that anymore. We say sexual orientation OCD because I think it was originally called HOCD. It was assumed that straight people were going to fear being gay, but guess what? Gay people fear they might be straight. So it doesn't work to call it HOCD. So I always refer to it as, just so you all know, sexual orientation OCD. So Ryan says he has that and has been stuck doing compulsions and seeking reassurance, but now you're confused because they're no longer working. And if they do work, or is it only last minute, is this normal? Well, there's a thing here that happens, everyone, with reassurance. And it's the same kind of thing that happens with substance use, over time, you build a tolerance, right? You build up a tolerance to your reassurance seeking, to your compulsions. And that's why you have to do them more and more, because they just don't give you that same good feeling anymore that they used to give you. And now you've got to do a little bit more all the time. And for some people, they get to a point where it feels like it just doesn't matter anymore what they do. They're stuck in this thought or image or urge. And as I would contend to you, as I still sit here thinking the ceiling may collapse on me because 3 Chippendales dancers wearing nothing but G-strings and tool belts are ripping the ceiling down all around me to crash it onto my head, it still hasn't changed me. So I guess I just don't have to be afraid of the image of that or the thought of that, because I've not met someone who can just be changed like that based on an image or a thought. That's just not how it works. Now you have a disorder that tells you, oh, he's wrong. That is how it works. Oh, let me tell you, that is how it works. But we've seen no evidence of that is actually the case. Alfonso says, I have anxiety about being anxious. Yeah. Like it's morning, but afraid to go home from work where I always feel safe because feeling anxious in my comfort zone. Yeah. It can be hard to describe. You're right there, Alfonso. But I'm anxious about being anxious, or I'm worried about worrying, is a common concern, you know. And it's all about that what if experience of what if I spend the rest of my life being anxious, or what if I spend the rest of my life worrying? Wouldn't that be awful and horrible? And yes, it sure would be, wouldn't it? I mean, it sounds, who wants that? Nobody I know would want something like that. So then it comes down to, is it okay to be anxious? And of course, the answer is sure. I mean, we have a fight, flight, or freeze response built into us, right? We are human beings. We are mammals who experience a fear response. So there's nothing wrong with being anxious. Being anxious is not bad unless you start to believe that it is. And then suddenly it feels bad to be anxious, even though we have no proof of it actually being bad to be anxious. Just want to keep that out there in that mindset to remind you a little bit of that. All right. June says, thank you. It's helpful to hear and know that OCD doesn't care about me, but only itself. Yeah, well, that's for sure. That's for sure, because we're here to work on, as Melinda says, living with uncertainty. That's our goal. Lauren says, can you help me please get rid of POCD? Well, Lauren, just so happens you're listening to the Wednesday night webinar through NoCD. NoCD, a downloadable app available through iOS or Google Play. And on there, we have a teletherapy network. And through our teletherapy network, which is now in all 50 states of the United States and Washington, D.C., by the way, you can hopefully utilize your insurance. If not, we have very affordable rates to help you to overcome your obsessive compulsive disorder concerns. And absolutely, Lord, I believe, can assist you with that. Reach out to a therapist, Lord. There's some good things available for you. Okay. All right, let's see. Just kind of reading through here, see what we got. I like that. OCD Crusher. We can only choose how to react to the thoughts we don't create. That's nice. Carrie talks about it's hard to realize that I'm in an OCD spiral until it's over. Well, that's good. So, you know what, Carrie, the important piece now is to recognize, what does it feel like to be in an OCD spiral? Yeah, there's great works now for tics. We used to think that people who had tics, they were done. I mean, they had tics. There was nothing we can do about it. And now my buddy of mine, Doug Woods, who's a great therapist who talks about treating tics, talks about this pre-monitory phase where we can teach people to monitor the buildup of tension that they're experiencing prior to the occurrence of a tic. And they can do something that interferes with the occurrence of the tic. Carrie, I want you to work on recognizing what does it feel like as that OCD spiral is building before it's overwhelming. I want you to really become aware of that. And that's when you can start to do ERP right there to interfere in things. Okay? So recognize that. Lauren says, does being attracted to a child make you a pedophile? Well, no, otherwise commercials wouldn't use like the most beautiful children. They'd use just ugly kids all the time. They want you to find children to be cute and attractive and adorable so that you will buy their products. So unless there's this conspiracy, which there are some people out there who do believe there's this wacky conspiracy about that. But otherwise, why does any thought in our head make us something? Yes. If I think my skin's green, is it green? Does that make me a frog? Well, that's a ridiculous question, isn't it? Of course, my question's not ridiculous to me, even though you might think it is. Just as I think your question is ridiculous, even though you don't think it is. Right. There we go. I have OCD at nighttime before I go to bed. What can I do? Well, you recognize that that's when you have OCD, so that's the time to do ERP then. That's what you do. Take advantage of that. Since you know that that's when it kind of is at its worst, you know then that that's the time to really implement the therapeutic things that you need to do in order to help yourself. So that's what you do. Someone says to Carl, but I feel like I can't control thinking about it. Well, you're right, you can't. And why do you need to control it, right? I don't need to control any of my thoughts, just like none of you need to control any of your thoughts. Why do we have to be in control of our thoughts? Or the images that we have? Or the urges? Why is that important? I was telling someone earlier today, I was doing a consultation call. And I was describing OCD and intrusive thoughts and about how as a therapist, I hear so many of them that I've absorbed them. And so now I said to her, if you and I were standing together at the top of a staircase, I would think about pushing you down the stairs. And she said, why would you do that? And I said, well, because I've treated people who've had that thought, and I just kind of absorb all of the thoughts that people I treat have, and I just carry them around with me all the time now. So now I can't be on a staircase without contemplating pushing people downstairs. And she said, well, you're afraid of that. I said, well, no, absolutely not. Why do I need to be afraid of that? She said, well, what if you do it? I said, well, I might, but just because I might do it doesn't mean that I need to be afraid of it. I can't rule out the possibility of something. It could happen. I don't think it will. And I'm cool with that. And I don't need the 100% assurance that OCD would tell you if you have OCD that you do have to have, right? And maybe that's one of the hallmarks of what we're talking about with obsessive compulsive disorder. You have to have 100% assurance. 99.999 is not good enough. How can I live in a world knowing that I might do or I might be blank? Everybody else lives in the world knowing those things. Why are you any different? You're not special. You're unique, but you're not special. The rules of the world apply to you no differently than they do to anybody else. You can act as if they do if you choose to, and that's totally up to you. That's your call, but it makes no sense whatsoever. And it's a massive, massive waste of time. So, I haven't found any OCD that's turned out to be helpful to people. I mean, no one with OCD has ever really come up to me and said, I got to tell you, this OCD thing's working out great for me. Boy, am I glad I developed it. Because I'll tell you, my life is so much better now that I've had OCD. So much better. I mean, now, because of OCD, I've eliminated the chance of molesting children, becoming the opposite sexual orientation that I am, running people over with my car, getting any kind of germ or disease whatsoever. Everything in my house is straightened up to a T. All the pictures are aligned on the wall exactly where they're supposed to be. And I figured out every existential issue in the world. So yeah, this was great to have OCD, and what a blessing it was. I've never had that conversation once. No one has ever actually said that to me, which leads me to believe OCD sucks and is not what anyone is actually really looking for. So, let's see. I know someone who has anxiety and OCD, kind of go hand in hand, but sure. He becomes very anxious every night during the night and now believes he will become anxious every single night. How can you get out of this cycle? Well, be anxious and learn how to handle it is really the biggest thing. I can't tell you not to be anxious. Not like that would ever work. I mean, all right, hold on. Everybody pay attention. Sit up straight. All right, is everybody ready? All right, we're going to try this. We're going to give this a go. Okay, you ready? Don't have OCD anymore. Does that work for anybody? Anybody? No? Not a one? No, nobody. Okay. All right, well, I tried. All right. Just wanted to run that experiment and see how it might go. Renek says, sit with them even if they might be true. Well, you sit with everything because it might be true, right? I'm sitting with the fact that my ceiling could collapse and 3 Chippendales dancers might show up here wearing G-screens and toolbars and rip the ceiling down. It might be true. It's not likely, I mean, but it might be true. So I'm going to sit with that thought because you know what? It might be true. Halen says, how do you do an exposure for intrusive thoughts of the world ending? Oh, I'd write out a great script for how the world ends and blows up and how we're all blown into bits into the cosmos and spend our rest of eternity floating out there until maybe one day, depending on where we float to, we could spend lots of time in eons and eons in space, but then maybe one day we get hooked in by another galaxy and get drawn into the middle and go into a black hole, and then we finally get to see what they were talking about, what happens on the other side of a black hole after you get called into it. That's what I would do. That's how I deal with things. Mike says he sees a pink elephant up there. You mean right there, Mike? There it is. Right there. There's our pink elephant. There it is. Suraz says, may need to think some of your cleaning rituals. Yeah, that's true. I would say so. Not going to be helpful. And Carl says, if I thought about being a zebra, would that make me a zebra? Not so much. Can OCD affect memory? And what's your take on false memory? So a couple of memory questions coming in. Yeah, OCD plays with memories all the time. So let's say that I know I kind of know that I was driving down a certain street, and then, years later I meet someone and they talk about, oh yeah, it was so sad. My son died in an accident. He was riding his bicycle on this street in this little town, and it was a hit and run. We miss him so much. And then I suddenly think, wait a minute. I drove through that town one time. And I remember I stopped at a fast food restaurant, and I was eating in the car, and boy, could it, oh no, could there be a chance? Is it possible? Oh man. Is it possible that while eating I was distracted and I might have, maybe I hit that kid on this bicycle? Oh my gosh, I got to drive back to that town now, and I got to do some research. Was there a description of the car or anything like that? And I've treated people who have done those types of things, who are afraid of what if I did that, right? They didn't actually run anyone over, but they had this memory issue and thinking that, well, since I don't remember something 100%, maybe the worst case scenario then actually occurred. So I'd better go and investigate just to make sure that that's the case, that it did not actually happen. Someone brought up the old law of attraction. Maybe we can kind of put that one to rest a little bit, this idea that thinking things does not make you then be those, want those. And I always talk about this example. On 9/11, there were 4 hijackers on each of those planes. There were at least 50 people on each of those planes that didn't want to die. So if the law of attraction brings about things by thinking things makes things happen, only 4 people were thinking about crashing and 50 were thinking about not crash. The 50 thinking about not crashing should have then stopped the plane from hitting the buildings, because 50 people thinking about wanting to live should have overpowered 4 people thinking about dying. But it didn't. Someone says, how can you stop anything? Whether a thought you get is OCD or regular thought? You don't. I mean, once in a while we have a weird song pop in our head, right? And then it's like stuck. It's the earworm thing. It's there. I can't stop my tinnitus. That's just going on for 20 years. That's been a joy of a sound for the last 20 years. But, I mean, it is what it is. Right? I don't have to stop a thought. I don't have to stop an image. Don't have to stop an urge. We can just sit with things. Someone says, I constantly feel unprepared now and review words or phrases. It happens automatically. Yeah, there are definitely things that happen automatically. But just because they do doesn't mean we have to pay attention to them. Right? I mean, we could just say, oh, there's that. Okay, whatever. And then go on with our day and be like, yeah, whatever. Oh, but it happened. It popped in my head. So now I have to neutralize it because it just automatically pops in my head. No, you don't have to neutralize it, even if it pops in your head. You don't have to do anything about it whatsoever. You could just let it be there. Just as I have allowed the idea of the ceiling collapsing on me while being brought down upon me by 3 Chippendales male dancers wearing bikinis and tool belts, which is still stuck in my head. Mike says, hey, Dr. McGrath, I have harm thoughts. My mother-in-law threw something away that's garbage, but my mind has told me if I don't get it, I will get upset and have harm thoughts toward her. Well, what a wonderful ERP opportunity to not go get it and to leave it there and to learn how to handle it. Because you say the issue is that once the garbage is picked up, you can never go back. This has caused me to be anxiety level 100. Well, Mike, either you have stumbled on the way to end all conflict, which is all of us go out to our garbage tonight and get something out of it that somebody else threw out, and now there will be no more anger left in the world. Or what a wonderful opportunity to do ERP, Mike, and to recognize that just because your brain and your OCD has concocted this rather, let's put it frankly, ridiculous notion that someone throwing something out will lead you to be upset with them and harm them, because then, we'd have to kill every busboy at every restaurant who scraped your plate. Or, well, we'd have to kill all the garbage men too, if that's the case, because they took all the garbage, So there'd be a lot of dead people going on from throwing things out, wouldn't there? Sometimes we just can throw things out, and there just doesn't have to be much meaning behind the whole experience, if that's the case. Carl said he's cured because I said to stop having OCD. So there you go. Thanks, Carl. All right. I have existential OCD. It's hard, but I've decided what I want to make the most out of in life. And you have. That's good. That's definitely what we want. We want you to work on making the most out of things. That's a lovely thing. Background, Kaylee sent me some of the Instas. So let's take a look at those too. How can family members be supportive? I would say the best way that a family member can be supportive of somebody who has OCD is to stop accommodating them with safety behaviors. The best way somebody who's a family member of someone who has OCD can help them is to stop providing safety behaviors. I could repeat that all night long. That's why I said it twice. If you do things in service of your loved one's OCD, all you are doing is making their OCD worse and not better. And I have people say, yes, but oh my gosh, it's so horrible. And at least I can give them a little bit of relief. But if I don't give them relief, they're going to feel horrible forever. No, they won't. They'll tell you that. That's the lie. That's the OCD lie. Oh, if you don't do this, you're going to feel like crap forever. And it's just going to be overwhelming and suck. Nah, not the case. That's a lie. Don't believe it. It's just not true. We have no evidence of that actually happening to anybody. None whatsoever. But boy, OCD can make you gullible. OCD tells you these lies and you're like, oh, yes. Tell me more, OCD, please. Yes. Oh, wise and sage OCD, please give me more of your crappy wisdom so that I may absorb it and believe it to be true. OCD is the crappiest guru in the world. It's time to get out of that one. Find a better one. Okay. Because that just doesn't work. What should you do about forgetting something and trying to figure it out? Then you believe something bad will happen to you. Well, test it out. Let's see if something bad does happen to you for forgetting something. I've forgotten more in my life than I remember. Okay. That's the way it goes. Carl says, since we can simply think something into being reality, I want you to think that Rush ucks, because he couldn't even write the full sucks word, because that. Thank you, Carl, for being a jackass. I appreciate that. Of course, I could think that Rush sucks, but they do not. They are the greatest band ever in the history of the world. So, but I could think they suck. It doesn't mean that I believe they do, right? My thoughts do not alter who I am or what I believe. So that's how I see it. Alexis says, thank you for doing this and using your time to help people with questions for free. You're welcome, Alexis. Always happy to be. Let's see. Just going through the feed more here. Let me pull up the Instagram ones from Background Kaylee one more time. Best way to manage OCD prior to being in treatment? Get into treatment as soon as you can, right? And stop doing safety behaviors. Because guess what is going to happen in treatment? They're going to work with you on not doing safety behaviors. So that's the best thing that you could start doing already, is to start practicing recognition of what are your safety behaviors and what can you do to challenge those safety behaviors. That's the best thing you can do. We've talked about POCD already, so we're good. Any advice for helping friends and family? Yep, we did that one. How do we approach rumination as a compulsion, existential OCD thing? Well, I think part of it is recognizing that, you know, we could think about something all day long. It doesn't solve something, right? No one with OCD solves anything, but they sure do spend a lot of time thinking about things, right? OCD is not a disorder that leads to a solvable conclusion. OCD is a disorder that leads to more rabbit holes to go down and to try to figure out where something could go wrong. So I would see rumination is just looking for more rabbit holes to go down. It's not the search for truth. It's the search for more ways something could go wrong. It's more poop hitting more fans, really, is what it is. That's what's happening in those kinds of situations. Nothing other than that. All right, Kaylee, thank you for those. Those were very helpful. And those are the last week ones too. Someone said, I think, this is probably some ongoing conversation, but it's not the fear that we die, it's the fear of what comes after. You know, I love to quote Richard Dawkins in this instance, because there are people, of course, with scrupulous concerns, especially maybe on the religious end, about, did I do something wrong in this life that's going to affect me in an afterlife, that if my religion believes that there is one or not? And how will I be sure that whatever my afterlife is going to be the good one, the right one, or something of that nature? So Dawkins has a great quote, which was, as far as I can tell, I was not alive for the last 4.5 billion years in the development of the universe as we know it. I'm going to be on this earth, in this universe, alive in this kind of reality that I find myself in this body or in this way, for probably, on average, 78 years. And then I will be gone again. If I'm not so worried about where I was for the first 4.5 billion years, why do I need to be so concerned where I'll be after? That was one of the wisest things I ever heard anyone say. I thought it was wonderful. That's pretty good. How many of your OCD has been like, what were my atoms like prior to my birth? Probably not. Okay. At least I haven't heard that one. Someone says here, Dr. McGrath, I keep being scared that I'm not having intrusive thoughts anymore, or obsessing about obsessing, which kind of leads to so then what if these things are really real? Another great OCD question. What if it's all real? Or the little sneaky jackass that OCD is, now that you've had therapy and you're no longer afraid of the thoughts or feelings or urges that you have, what if it was only the fear of those things happening that actually led you to not doing them? And now that you're not afraid of them anymore, now what if you'll actually go do them because you're no longer afraid of them? I'm still not afraid of 3 Chippendales dancers showing up here in bikinis, wearing tool belts, ripping down the ceiling and dropping them on top of my head, even though I'm thinking it. If OCD can screw with something, it's going to do that. Always remember that. Nothing is immune to what OCD can screw with. It's just not going to be able to hide. If there's something that you hold dear, OCD is going to screw with it. Okay? Which again is why this is not about getting tons of education and doing tons of reading and all of those things. It's about recognizing that I don't have to go down that rabbit hole of a thought anymore. I can move past it. And that's what I need to do. It's been interesting watching the feed tonight. There's discussions of Eckhart Tolle and readings and all sorts of things. Wow, it's great. Now, before we're done tonight, I would like all of you to once again spend a moment staring at your ceiling and try to make it collapse on you before we finish out tonight's webinar. Still there. Hasn't fallen on me yet. Also, haven't heard the doorbell. Therefore, don't think the Chippendales dancers are showing up in their bikinis and their tool belts. But I can picture them in my head, but it still hasn't changed my orientation at the moment. So, what have we all learned tonight? Could the ceiling fall? Sure. Maybe not tonight. At some point. Maybe it will. I mean, heck, if you think about it. Most buildings at some point in time are going to fall down, right? So, someday. But for now, not so much. So I'm going to sit with that. I want all of you to sit with that. And I want all of you to keep fighting the good fight, recognizing that you can handle it. Right? You don't have to figure everything out. If you did, that's all we would do all day long. All of us would just sit here all day long and try to figure everything out. And OCD would love that. Society would fall apart, but OCD would love it. We're not here to do OCD's bidding. We're here to challenge it. Thanks, everyone. Good to see you once again. Remember, Rush is the greatest band that's ever existed in the history of the world. And OCD sucks. So those are just 2 good lessons to take from tonight, I think, to go with that. And we see how it goes. But looking forward to seeing everybody again next week. Have a good night.